Welcome to Rinehart Garage again, and this is my 928, and we're going to do an episode on it. Stay tuned. Welcome to Rinehart Garage. This is going to be the European segment. We don't just work on Mustangs, we do a little bit of everything. We've got four-wheeler action, we've got European action, and of course we definitely have Mustang action. My other car is a Mustang, by the way. This car here has been in the family for 32 years. I was actually with my dad when he test drove it back in September of '87. And it's been a joy to have, but also pretty much a freaking burden sometimes. As anyone knows, working on old cars, there's always something. But I do have a lot of memories with it, and it is a kick-ass car. But I've been wrenching on it for about 20 years, actually 25 years, and I'm keeping it going, and it's still a beautiful car to drive. It's a 4.5 liter transaxle car, and what that means is it actually runs a torque tube from the flywheel to the transmission, which is in the back. And the reason they did that was for a weight distribution. This is a GT car, but GT in the sense of Grand Tour, and it is a nice long haul drive. I've driven this car from Texas to Boston, Boston to Georgia, just all over. And when my dad had it, he used to drive it from Boston to Montreal all the time. In fact, one time he made it in just over 3 hours, which is a high average speed, we'll say. And yeah, so I've been wrenching on it for a little over 20 years, and it's been fun. 3 years ago, I had the engine out to do a reseal, fix all the electrics. I replaced looms, the steering rack. I've since then done a suspension rebuild, replacing the shocks, the front upper and lower control arms, the lower ball joints, I mean. So here, let me open up this damn hood.
Let's take a look.
Yeah. This camera stuff's not as easy. So what we have here is a 4.5 liter V8. It's an aluminum block heads intake. Pretty much anything metal is aluminum in this, except for a few pieces like the fuel rails and the linkage and stuff. It's all aluminum. And on that note too, the front fenders, the hood, and the doors are aluminum. The actual main body is galvanized steel. But it's a 4.5 liter V8. It's got 220 horsepower, and it scoots. 220 today might not seem like a lot, but back in '81, which is this year, that was actually considered supercar territory. This was the fastest production car of its day, and the 0 to 60 times are kind of laughable compared to what they are today. But back then, your average car was doing it in 12, 10 seconds. And this one did it in just under 8.
Dang.
And it's really mainly a highway cruiser. It will get up and go and pass like you wouldn't believe. And it was really built for the Autobahn, where you can drive at a high speed for a sustained period of time. And I can prove that, and my dad can prove that. We've driven a lot of miles on this. The car actually has 116,000, so as far as a 38-year-old car, that's not much. But it's definitely seen some miles, and it's never actually sat for a huge period of time. My father, he had it sit for about 7 years towards the end, and that didn't help. But for the last 11 years, I've been bringing it back from that. And with that being said, I've gone through this car extensively. The first things I had to do were fix the brake calipers because I had a rear brake that was dragging. So I took all the calipers off, rebuilt them, went through them all, and got that all sorted out. I've rebuilt the suspension. I put new shocks in. The upper control arms on the front I've replaced. Lower ball joints, and for you people that do know something about 928s, they're now the steel ones, so I don't want to hear a lot. It did have the original aluminum ones, but they are now steel. I've replaced the steering rack. I had the engine out about 3 years ago, and that was about a 5-month ordeal. It took quite a while, but I did it with the intention of not having to go back in there anytime soon, which we'll find out a little bit about that in a few minutes. But I had the engine out. I resealed it. I changed all the gaskets. I went through the wiring and fixed any issues we had with that. There's a main wire loom harness that goes through the front. I've actually sent that out to Norway and had them rebuild that, and it is perfect. So I've done that, and like the injectors with the plastics, after 40 years they get brittle, and I found some of them were just you couldn't have the retaining clips holding them on anymore, so I've replaced all that. I also spent about 3 days degreasing parts. So when I had the engine out and I had it all apart, I brought it down to the crankcase. I never took the pistons out or any of that because the leak down was in really good shape. The worst cylinder I had was 5%, so I wasn't going to bring it down any further than that. But I spent 3 days with over a case of degreaser cleaning the parts. And if you've ever seen a 928, this is one of the cleanest 4.5 liters you'll ever see.
Good looking ride, dude.
Yeah. The intake, a lot of people like to powder coat them, bead blast them and powder coat them. I'm not a big fan of that because that introduces the media into there, and it's such a porous metal that sometimes you don't get all the media out, and you can have engine issues if that gets into the engine. What I did was I used an ultrasonic tank, which is hot water and soap with an ultrasonic wave sent through it to degrease in that. And it came out to factory finish, which is better than I thought. And that's after 3 years, and it still looks beautiful. The intake on this car is, in the Porsche community, known as a spider intake because of the 8 legs. And yeah, this may not be the most powerful 928 engine, but it's the prettiest. It really, I love this look. It's very specific for the Porsche and the 928 community. This engine has just visually a lot of character.
It's a good looking engine.
It's just got the single distributor. It is a fuel injected car. It's got L-Jetronic, which is an electronic fuel injection. It's the one step they went from CIS, which is continuous, which is a mechanical fuel injection. So there is a little computer that controls the bandwidth, the pulses of the fuel injection. And it does a great job. It's a very basic system, but it does a good job. What else? I rebuilt the air conditioning system. I re-hosed it. I put a new compressor on. So this car, for a 38-year-old car, blows nice and cold. Cool. Which is nice on the highway drives because of the shape of the car. It's kind of round. If you have the windows down, it is a noisy car, and it is actually very fatiguing. I've driven several times from here to Banner Elk, which is a big 928 gathering, and the first couple of years I didn't have AC, and it just wears your butt out. Now we can have the windows up, and it's a nice leisurely drive.
Did you convert that to 134A?
I did. I converted that to 134. I went between the two, whether to do it or not, and I just said, since I'm going to replace everything, I'm just going to do the 134 because it's a lot easier, a lot more accessible. You can get the R12, but I figured I'd just do that, and then I can go to the corner store and buy some 134A if I do need it. but it's been holding the charge for 3 years, and it does terrific. I also replaced, while I had the engine out, the brake booster, and got that because that used to leak. It's a 38-year-old car, and even now it still has stuff that's going to be addressed, and I know for the rest of my years with it, it will continuously be something.
Talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, on the interior wise, I haven't had to do a lot, but it's a two-tone leather, so you have the tan and then the darker brown leather. And I've replaced the dash and the pod because on 928s of this age, it's highly unusual to find one that doesn't have splits on the dash, and that is true leather. The pod is a vinyl with a foam underneath it, and those are notorious to split. So I've replaced the dash and the pod. And then on the driver's seat here, as in a ton of 928s, they usually have a split on the side bolster, and I actually found these seats in Oregon on eBay, and they were an exact match to what I have. And the style of this seat fits so well with the early ones, and I didn't want to just put a more modern seat in it. I really like the character of it. It really fits in with the 70s, early 80s look. So it took me a lot of years to find one. These seats are actually power, and my original ones were manual. But Porsche, in the way they design things, they already ran the power to that area. It was just a simple 2-prong plug, and I just had to plug them in, and I had full power seats.
Cool.
But besides that, the rest of the interior is original. I haven't done much, just cleaned it, and it shows its age. And they like to call that patina. And yeah, it's held up pretty well.
Looks great, dude.
It's one little quirky thing with this, if you can get that, Mike, is if you look on the Speedo, there was a couple years where the government mandated that you can only have an 85 mile an hour Speedo in the car that comes into the States or an American car, and they also had to highlight 55. And this is actually the second Porsche that I've owned that had that kind of Speedo. I had a 1980 911 that had that same Speedo, and it's kind of funny, and I often thought about changing it, but now we're so many years down the road, I've just decided to keep it because it's one of the quirks with the car. Another one is this one's got a solid roof. Most 928s have a sunroof, and it's a really small sunroof, which to me is kind of a waste, and I'm glad we don't have that on this. It makes this car a little rarer. And then the last thing that's different is most 928s, as a dealer installed option, would put a side mirror on here. It was never a factory option, at least in the States that I know of, but a dealer installed option at this time period. And this car was never installed with one. I actually thought for a long time about putting one, but then I got, it makes it a little more special, so I've left it off. So as you can see, there's no holes, and there never have been holes there.
Cool.
We hope you enjoyed the episode on the Porsche, and like,
Subscribe.
and share.
Yeah. hit the notification bell.
That's right, because we're up to 44 subscribers now.
Right. Yeah, we want to let any one of y'all